Hello, this is the summary of my 6th week of dev streams. This one will be also short, in fact, it will be probably the shortest one. We'll see how it turns out. Because on this week, I really didn't do anything publicly besides just starting out one particular system, and that will be really it. So, apologies that this thing turned out as it is, and probably the next week probably also will turn out like this. And the next week probably also will turn out like this. Because currently I'm kind of in a storm of arranging up things, so there will be a lot of disappointing summaries like this one. Yeah, brace for it. As a usual reminder, link to my Twitch channels is in the description. I stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 15 of Central European Time, as well as on Saturdays, later at 19 or 20. Well, usually at 20, really. Any exceptions to that are informed on my Discord server, and I advise to rather look for those exceptions because there are a lot of them. So let's get to this disappointing week. I'll stitch Monday and Wednesday again into one chapter. There was no Friday stream, so don't wait for that. And on the Monday, I didn't do anything productive for the project. I took a kind of break in a sense because I spent the entire 4 hours modeling a revolver in Blender because I simply felt like it. In the end, what I later refined in this model in private time, it turned out to be quite an interesting piece. I'm not a modeler, and there's no reason to brag about this, but I just wanted to make a futuristic revolver, and it turned out to just look like a regular one. So that's it for Monday, really. Now, on Wednesday, I was working on pathfinding, and spoiler alert, I didn't do anything. I've just drafted some skeleton for the structure, but no technical algorithms and no working model in general. All I had was the concept for the architecture for the pathfinding. I won't delve into the details of what owns what and what scripts do we have and stuff in general. I'll just quickly cover what is the idea of what is the problem with pathfinding in a streamed divided world like the one we're building, where you have zones instead of one giant map. Because you see, if you have one giant map, like in a RTS game, for example, in this situation, you have simply one grid, one octree, one flow field, or whatever medium you have, and you can simply run the algorithm or pathfinding whenever you want, and there's no complications in that. In a divided world, which is a patchwork of zones, instead of one medium like that, you have a bunch of zones, each with its own medium. And the problem is, they can be both displaced and they also don't really know how to connect and where. They're kind of patches that flow around. To fix that, you add stitches to the patchwork. In this case, they're called portals, and in general, from what I heard, it's simply called portals. And what a portal is, it's simply a structure that contains two waypoints between those zones, which allow for transitioning, and you can use them directly for moving your unit or enemy or whatever. And they can also have assigned traversal costs, which you can use in your pathfinding algorithm, like A-star, for example, which already uses coding for deciding which node to move to. This way, you could design how to make the units walk realistically and find the actual shortest path and not walk through some weird transitions. Now, when you have all these patches and all these stitches between those patches, the way to pathfind on such world is to really have two layers of pathfinding. One macro layer where you decide through which zones to move through, and then the micro pathfinding, which is deciding how to move in a specific zone. Let's show this on an example. Take this level shown here. You want to move from point A to point B. To pathfind for this level, what you first do is you do the macro pathfind, in which you treat zones like your nodes, your points through which to decide to move through. and you treat the portals as the edges, links, whatever. As in every pathfinding system, you first check if it's even possible to reach the target, because you might be in a completely isolated space. You might not reach the zone on a macro level. There's no true transition on this patchwork to the zone you want to reach. When you verify that you actually can move, then you construct small micro paths. These are typically more coarse and less precise than the original path, than the final path, because they are meant simply to check if it's possible to physically move through these zones. Because, for example, you might have connections between two zones, but actually a specific zone has a wall which you can't move through. Or maybe the zone is simply littered with stuff the player threw around and it's just impossible to move through. If you verify that this also is the case, that you can move, then you construct the entire path. The entire path is not just one process of one path, it's really a series of smaller paths, a queue. These would typically look like navigate from your initial point to the next portal, then navigate through the portal, then navigate from this portal to another portal, and so on, until you reach your destination. Of course, during the traversal, you might find out that something's changed, because maybe when you were originally planning the path, everything was properly set, but maybe the player closed some gate in some zone, and you can't turn it on or whatever from a perspective as an AI. So what you do in that situation is that you basically stop the current pathfinding, and you simply recalculate if it's possible to reach the player again. And so that is the core idea, really. Any other detail will be, well, detail. That will be minor things to add or improve. The core idea is how to even manage to pathfind through such patched up world in a game. And so, in terms of actual implementation, again, what I did on Wednesday was really just building some skeletons. I didn't even build the pathfinding system. What I was stuck on for most of the stream was mainly the medium. I didn't really know what I wanted to use for each zone, for both the course data you use for verifying the paths and the actual runtime data which you use to actually move smoothly from point to point. And in fact, I haven't yet figured it out even in private time for this entire week. So that will be it for this summary. Again, it's a short one. There's really nothing to report for the last week. So apologies, and well, see you next time. I don't think I have any reflections to tell, so see ya.